Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Corbs. Nick, we've just had week 3 of the NFL. What are your thoughts?
Dom thought it was a great week, big upsets. I didn't really see it coming, but, ready to talk about it.
Brilliant. Well, that's exactly what we're here to do. So we've got quite a few things to get through in this show. We're talking about the Panthers offense. We're going to talk a bit about Caleb and the Bears, then about Anthony Richardson, which I'm really excited about because he was one of my big kind of preseason agendas. And then we're going to talk about the Packers, Vikings, etc. And then we're going to end with ranking the 3-0, the currently undefeated teams. But let's then get kick-started with what I think is probably the most interesting thing from this week. And that is the fact that Bryce Young in Carolina was quite clearly the problem.
Yeah, Dom, I think that's completely right. Bryce Young was as big a problem for Carolina as Carolina was for Bryce Young. You saw a lot of talk online, people saying, Josh Allen couldn't succeed, Patrick Mahomes couldn't succeed in Carolina. Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, did. And it wasn't that he just played better and had better stats. It was the way he got those stats, which was completely different to Bryce Young. He was able to throw over the middle of the field with arm strength and size and bravery, which Bryce Young simply doesn't have. I'm not sure if he won't or don't, but he can't, basically. And I saw the great throw to Xavier Legette, where he settled in the middle of the field, in between linebackers. He really, really transformed that offense. Great game for Deontay Johnson, great game for even Mingo, who I thought was going to be a massive bust, somehow showed up in that game. So I thought it was really, really good for Andy Dalton, who was the first quarterback of the season to have 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So for Andy Dalton to step in and do that, it's really, really put the nail in what already might have been a dead career for Bryce Young.
Yeah, I think you saw that Panthers offense change immediately in the very first drive. The throw up the seam to Tommy Tremble to put the Panthers in the red zone was a throw that Bryce Young was too terrified to even attempt, let alone successfully making. And I think you're right, New, to touch on the quarterback with the slightly stronger arm in Andy Dalton, even at an older age. You can see what that can kind of unlock for a quarterback in terms of being able to fit the ball into tighter windows and things. But I think for me, the bottom line really is that I think a lot of the good throws that Andy Dalton made were more, timing and touch and anticipation and being able to hang in the pocket under pressure. And the ironic thing is that Bryce Young was able to do all of those things at Alabama. He just has not been able to do any of them in the NFL. And so it's almost quite infuriating because Bryce Young could do that. Theoretically, at least. Obviously not in actuality, he hasn't. But in theory, with the skill set that he has shown he at least has to some degree, he could do. And I think the biggest thing for me was just the fact that he was able to stand in the pocket and deliver, which Bryce Young couldn't do. The one that was kind of like floated to Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, the third touchdown in the corner. Great throw, by the way. Absolutely perfect throw.
Oh, yeah, no, it was a great throw. It was a great throw, absolutely. But I genuinely believe that is a throw that Bryce Young could make, in theory, again. And I just, it's not like a Mahomesian or a Josh Allen. That's not like an arm strength thing. That's an anticipation and timing, and that's what Bryce Young had in Alabama. But it's just that ability to literally not force an offense to trip up over its own feet. Like Bryce Young wasn't just like not operating the offense at a high level. He was making that entire offensive unit play considerably worse. And this is what was so important, I think, for the Panthers, is that they felt like a different team. Like it came across on the screen. The run game was good. They had 131 rushing yards. The offensive line looked good. They only allowed 2 sacks. Obviously, Andy Dalton had 300 plus passing yards. And that's the problem, is that you can lose a game as a rookie head coach, and you can lose a game as a second-year quarterback. But as a head coach, if you lose the locker room, your career is done. And that's the thing, that's the issue, is that they were at risk of losing the locker room because of how badly Bryce Young was playing. I mean, you saw Adam Thielen, one of the most tepid blokes. He's not exactly a diva. And he's an undrafted free agent. Like, he's getting frustrated on the sideline.
Yeah.
That's it. And you cannot, they're saying now, he might play, later in the season. He's not. He's done.
No. And also for Dave Canales, he needs to keep his job. The offense looked almost like similar to the Tampa offense from last year. He's really been able to revitalize his head coaching career. If he was going to stick with Bryce Young, that could have been it. And also, Dom, I want to make another point about how, there's been a lot of talk online. I've seen this on NFL Twitter about how Tampa 2 and cover 4 is ruining the NFL and how defenses are being whatever. Andy Dalton,
cover 2, yeah.
Andy Dalton went into that 2010s AFC North and then swam. And I think that's something that Bryce Young hasn't been able to do. Andy Dalton's able to take that extra second in the pocket, that's not a check down, to then make that big throw because he just has that X factor. He's not afraid, much like Baker Mayfield or one of those players that isn't super mobile but stays in the pocket. He just chucked it down to the check down straight away. On those big third downs, like we covered in the last pod, Dom, he would just check it down, 6-yard gain, and then pick on first down. That was really the big difference, and really the big difference between a veteran and a rookie, in my opinion.
Yeah, those check downs, man, like death by 1,000 check downs. It was brutal. Bryce, the bottom line here is that Bryce Young is unplayable and should be traded. And Dalton brings experience and like just an average level of quarterback play to what should have been a much improved Panthers team with all the offensive additions they made with the 2 new offensive linemen. They drafted, obviously, Xavier Legette. They signed Deontay Johnson in free agency. So I think, the Panthers, I said in the preseason, shouldn't be the worst team in the league. Now, I got proven very wrong very early on, and thankfully Bryce Young has been pulled out of there. But on paper, obviously the defense is terrible. But the offense on paper really shouldn't have been as bad as they were performing. But then talking about an offense that perhaps isn't performing as well as it should be, I have to, and I know we discussed it last year, but I have to talk about Caleb Williams and the Bears. My bottom line here, Nu, but I want to hear your thoughts first, is that I think the Bears coaching staff needs to be fired.
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree. Like we still saw flashes of Caleb's talent there, like 2 beautiful throws to Rome Odunze. His scrambling ability made a D lineman eat dirt. You could really see why he was still picked number 1. But what are they doing with him, man? Like he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league in maybe a decade in pure raw ability, and they're not leaning into that skill at all. I think they need to be gone. That Seahawks OC that they hired, he's not really cutting it, really not making the use of his talents. We spoke about it before, Dom, but it's a bit of a shame because he's such a talented player and it's just a wasted year.
The wasted year is exactly how I would is how I would sum it up. I think Matt Eberflus, the head coach, is a lame duck head coach. I don't know why he was given the opportunity to kind of rebuild with Caleb Williams when he failed with Justin Fields. I don't know why they brought in Shane Waldron, who was not a particularly great offensive coordinator in Seattle. And look at the Seahawks now. Yeah. Suddenly, JSN's getting 100-yard games. Suddenly, DK Metcalf's on almost 400 yards on the season after just 3 games. Like, that was almost an addition by subtraction, them getting rid of Shane Waldron. And Caleb, I think, is doing well, but with a pretty subpar situation. He's making checks at the line, he's changing his protection, he's calling audibles, and he's making some nice throws. I think there's a bit of that meme, you're not in Pac-12 anymore. He's not, and you can see that, right? That is an obvious disadvantage of Caleb Williams' game, is that he is trying to out-athlete players that he can't out-athlete. That's just the fact of the matter. But there is still flashes of that X-factor ability, the playmaking ability, the play out of structure ability, which we know Caleb has. Now, that might not translate as strongly as it did in college, but it's still there and it's still a big part of his game. But there are a few things that aren't quite lining up, obviously. The big thing for me is that he's not quite hitting those deep balls when he is scrambling outside the pocket. We saw him overshoot Rome Odunze on one pretty early on. Like at USC, those were automatic. Caleb was at the pocket. And again, the window of openness, quote unquote, isn't quite the same in the NFL as it is in college. But nevertheless, he's not quite connecting on those, and he's also making some pretty ill-advised throws. He threw that flat really late in the game against the Colts this weekend. It was his third progression in the read. Threw it like while being tackled. It was lucky that it wasn't a pick six. But the play calling is absolutely, absolutely unforgivable. I think it's cause for massive concern and should be professional misconduct, essentially. First of all, why are you running a speed option in the red zone?
It's a terrible play. Absolutely horrific play.
It's comically bad. The whole point of a speed option, for anyone that's not quite aware, is that it puts one defender in a bind to tackle either the quarterback who has the ball or the running back who the quarterback might potentially pitch the ball to. And depending on the defender's commitment, the quarterback will either pitch it or the running back or will keep it. But that's meant to happen in space. This is happening in the red zone, where every single Colts defender is 2 yards from the line of scrimmage. And he's running it towards where the defenders are. Two of the defensive linemen are outside of the tackle, so he's not going to be able to wall them off. The whole play was a complete disaster from start to finish. And the biggest issue for me, I think this kind of sums up the Bears at the moment, is that they had DeAndre Swift in the backfield for that play, who I think is one of the least dynamic, least explosive, least creative running backs currently in the NFL. He had 1.5 yards per carry in this game. He had 20 yards from 13 attempts. Roschon Johnson had 30 yards from 8 carries. He had 3 yards per attempt, but he's nowhere to be seen. I don't know why Roschon Johnson wasn't in on that play. And Caleb Williams should not have to throw the ball 52 times in a game for them to be kind of remotely in it. Was this a perfect game from Caleb Williams? No, there's still a few mistakes there. But I think the bottom line for me is that we're seeing the flashes from Caleb. I'm not worried about him and his development. Well, I'm a little bit worried about his development, but I'm not worried about him in terms of his long-term career. But I just think the coaching staff is holding this team back.
Well, Dom, I think it's also important to highlight Rome Odunze there. So Rome Odunze, as we were both high on him on the draft, I basically had him, Neighbours and Harrison 1A, 1B, 1C. Now, I didn't really have too much separating them. Neighbours and Harrison are balling out. They are both having Rookie of the Year level seasons, maybe even all pro seasons for Neighbours. Odunze, nowhere to be seen. His combination of skill and size should be utilised, especially with Keenan Allen out of the picture. But he's just not getting targets. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. They've got all this offensive talent, and you're so right, Dom. The play calling, they're not utilising any of the talent they brought in over the offseason at all. And that's not going to get you very far in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the big positives for Bears fans to take away from this game is that Rome Odunze finally kind of made a bit of a statement, and more than a bit of a statement. He had 100 yards, he had a touchdown, like he had a good game, but it should not have taken 3 weeks for them to realise, oh hey, let's put Caleb Williams under centre, let's get play action, and let's hit Rome Odunze on a deep crosser. Like that was one of their first big connections. Like that's the most simple thing to do in the NFL at the moment. Like just not. They're turning down free plays essentially. The Bears are, but then. I think they're new from one struggling offense to perhaps then one struggling quarterback in Anthony Richardson.
Well, yeah, Dom. So I think it's very similar, however, almost inversed. As in, it's not the coaching's fault. We know the coach, the Colts have got a great coaching staff, but Anthony Richardson sometimes just makes these terrible plays. He had one pick I could think of where for no reason he throws off platform across his body and sails it 2 yards past any receiver in the vicinity. What is he thinking? What is he doing? Like, I see the talent with Anthony Richardson. I'm sure we both do, Dom. He can make plays out of structured plays. He can run over linebackers. I really see why they're excited. But these stupid plays, which is what they are, really keep on adding up and adding up and adding up. And for every highlight, there's 2 lowlights. And that is not sustainable as a team, as a quarterback, to get very far. Now, I don't think it's, warning signs just yet. I don't think, I'm not claiming for Anthony Richardson to be benched at all. I still think he is a good player. But they really need to iron this out before the end of the season. Because, like we saw in Carolina, Andy Dalton's not making those mistakes. And if you've got a good team, an average quarterback who doesn't make mistakes can get you to the playoffs. Whereas Anthony Richardson, who might be more talented, can lose you games. And I think that's really what he needs to iron out, Dom.
Yeah, I think really we're seeing Anthony Richardson for what he is, which is an inaccurate, unpolished quarterback. And people, I think, were silly to think of him as anything more than that. Like, I know he gets lots of fantasy points, and I know, like you say, he's got some amazing highlight reel plays. But people kind of crawl back into the woodwork where he's airmailing a wide open AD Mitchell, or he's turning the ball over on a really ill-advised throw. And I think the point with Anthony Richardson, which I think is really true, I think generally speaking at the moment, and I tweeted this, is that people aren't giving rookie quarterbacks or young quarterbacks enough time to develop, right? I think the whole point with Richardson is you're absolutely right. An average quarterback can get you really far, but very rarely does an average quarterback win you the Super Bowl. Yeah. And I think that with Richardson, that's the balancing act here at the moment, isn't it? It's that, yeah, at the moment, he is going to lose you a few games. The Colts, I think, were quite overrated. I think Anthony Richardson was quite overrated going into the season, and I said as much. I said he was the most overrated passer in the NFL, and I think that's true.
Well, Dom, he was second in MVP odds at the start of the year. That's how high people were.
Yeah, and you said that on the pod.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. Like he started 20 games since high school. Why? Like, he was never going to be a Patrick Mahomes, a CJ Stroud as a passer. Like that was simply never going to happen. So I think for Richardson, the Colts really, it's the question of, okay, well, this guy, yeah, he's struggling now. Yeah, we might lose 1 or 2 or 3 games. It might make it a bit harder to win a couple more, but ultimately, we hope that he's going to be a quarterback who can take us the distance, because you see it as well. Like that's the difference between Richardson and Bryce Young almost, is that Young showed absolutely nothing, and the flashes that you see from Richardson are amazing. I mean, like even in this game alone, he had a great throw, like a throw with touch, which is something that I thought he struggled with last year and in college. Threw a great throw with touch to Alec Pierce. That was a fantastic throw, but then a few plays later, just pooches it to the defense in the red zone. Now, yeah, the ball was tipped or might have been tipped. It was hard to tell from the broadcast, but he was still throwing it to an area where 3 defenders were. Like, regardless of the outcome, that's not a throw you want your quarterback to be trying to make. And really, he's an amazing athlete with amazing physical traits, elite physical traits, and so he can offset some of his shortcomings as a passer by running the football and by just unleashing mental throws. But he eventually needs to win games by passing the football. And he can't do basic things well at the moment. His mechanics are all over the place. He's not setting his feet, which is why he missed a wide open AD Mitchell. He's making bad decisions. And he's had 6 interceptions on the season. Like, that is crazy. And again, it's part of the development. I'm not concerned about Richardson at all. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. It's just about kind of limiting those terrible plays and trying to maximize those elite ones. But I think that we all need to understand that just because a player gets you loads of fantasy points, and because a player has some amazing plays in a week, that's not unless he's that player consistently, like out and out, drive through drive, it doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah, Dom, what you're seeing is someone basically learning on the job. He doesn't really know how to play quarterback, and I personally believe that he will get there, and I think he will be a high-level quarterback. But if you're a Colts fan, or if you're the Colts organization, how long will it take for him to get there is the question, because flashes are all good, but consistency is the most important thing. And I still think he can put it together, but he does just make those terrible decisions, and it's mostly technique based rather than mental, which I think is better, but it's definitely not good. Like with Bryce Young, it's all mental, and then that affects the rest of his technique. But with Richardson, you can tell he doesn't really think it through. He's just trying to get the ball there. It doesn't really matter about feet or arm placement or whatever. But I think it will come together, but I think it might be a slow year for the Colts.
I think it will definitely be a year of growing pains. This is essentially his rookie year, because obviously he was injured for all but 4 games of last season. For me, the bottom line with Richardson is, even if he reaches 50% of what he might be as a quarterback, that's a quarterback you can win with in the NFL. Yeah. At the moment, though, he's not even at like 20%. And like you said, I think learning on the job is the perfect way to describe Anthony Richardson. But then a offensive coordinator who's actually teaching a quarterback on the job as well is Matt LaFleur with Malik Willis. Now, what are your thoughts on that Packers game?
Well, I wasn't expecting it, to be honest, Dom. Malik Willis is the only quarterback I've ever seen get pulled halfway through a preseason drive because Mike Vrabel was so annoyed with him and he could not manage to run an offense. They traded him as maybe a reclamation project. Maybe if that worked out, purely upside. I think it was maybe a 6th, maybe even a conditional 7th, change of anything. But he had a great game. His athleticism showed through, his passing ability showed through, and put it all together for a really nice win for the Packers.
I would say give Matt LaFleur the Coach of the Year award right now. He has taken, like you say, a quarterback that was completely written off. He had 66 career dropbacks before just being cast aside, and he's got him and this team to 2-0. Like, he's got Malik Willis driving down the field with RPOs. He's got schemed open receivers, going against the flow of the offense, hitting them in stride, deep crosses, just get the ball in their hands and let them pick up yards after the catch. And he's picking up big plays as well with his arm and his leg. He's converting multiple third downs in a drive with his arm. He's a good rushing threat, always has been, obviously, at Liberty. And I just think, for me, it shows that coaching is king in the NFL. I think I really underestimate that every single time. There is not a single first rounder on that Packers offense. And Matt LaFleur just has them cooking. Like, the receiver core, I think, in Green Bay is such an interesting one, because I think it's a great example of the them being greater than the sum of their parts. Like Christian Watson by himself, not a fantastic receiver. It's quite one-dimensional. Jaden Reed, obviously like very talented, but physically not that elite. Like, but all of those together, all of those players together with like, Tucker Kraft, then obviously the legs of Malik Willis and, whoever else they throw in with their weapons, it makes for a really rounded offense. Like there's a lot of skill sets available there. Like Christian Watson is the deep threat. Jaden Reed gets about 7 rush attempts a game and always makes them into, like 5+ yards.
Yeah, and so you see it when the receivers move away. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, for example, when he moved out of the Green Bay, he was one of the worst receivers in the league. I don't. He might not even be in the league anymore. I'm not too sure, but he's definitely not on any fantasy squads.
I think he's on the Bills.
Oh, is he? Oh, that's not a good sign. But yeah, no. Sorry, carry on. I just want to. Yeah.
But LaFleur had Malik Willis playing good, confident, efficient football, and that's why they're 2-0. I think that he almost like makes a mockery of the NFL, Matt LaFleur, with how good he is as a coach. To do that with a quarterback like Malik Willis, he's literally saying to everyone, why aren't you guys doing this? Why am I the only one that's able to turn around a third round? Well, I don't even know when it was drafted. Third round quarterback into what looks like a feasible starter, but as soon as you take him out of that, he's not going to be.
Well, Dom, then this begs the question: why did they pay Jordan Love so much money? Jordan Love is the highest paid player, or joint highest paid. I think it's $55 million a year, Dom. Is that correct? I think roughly, give or take.
Yeah, I don't have it to hand.
Yeah, and if you're right, LaFleur coaching is king, and LaFleur is the person who can, basically make it work with anyone. Like similarly, it's from the Shanahan coaching tree, and we saw it down in San Francisco with Brock Purdy, and all the way around the league, it's sort of spreading. But do you think he's worth that $55 million now? They've absolutely dogged the Titans with a reclamation project with effectively a bust who's won 2 consecutive games. Do you think that Jordan Love should earn his place back? Should they trade him away? What do you think they should do?
No, okay. I completely think that Jordan Love was worth the money because this is how good this offensive system is with Malik Willis. When you put a quarterback who is like genuinely good, and I think Malik Willis is playing like a good quarterback, but we know that we don't know for sure, but he's clearly not as talented as Jordan Love, at least from the sample size that we have of both quarterbacks, right? That's pretty certain. So to put a quarterback, it's a bit like the Shanahan with Brock Purdy, right? Like with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, yeah, sure, you can go so far with a quarterback, but really, again, like I said at the beginning, like a few minutes ago, to go the distance, to win the Super Bowl, you need to have an elite quarterback. Yeah, you can make it pretty far with an elite passing offense, but you really need that elite passer to take that to the next level, to take it to contending for the Super Bowl, to take it to winning the AFC and NFC championship games. So I think Jordan Love is absolutely the right quarterback to have and is absolutely worth the money. I think they're always worth the money paying the top quarterbacks. And I think that Malik Willis will just be like a fun backup, almost like a Tyler Huntley at the Ravens, like someone that they know that if Jordan Love goes down, they can put Malik Willis in and he can operate the offense. He can also like grow, develop. Maybe he gets like a kind of Sam Darnold reclamation project later down the line and Geno Smith reclamation project later down the line. But no, I definitely think that Jordan Love could be the starter when he comes back. Tell me you think the same.
No, I do think the same. I think what would be a more interesting thing is when, like, for example, when it comes time to pay Watson and pay the receivers, they don't need to do that. They can just get another second round guy in who has the same profile. I completely think you're right, Dom. I do think Jordan Love is an elite quarterback and you need that to win a Super Bowl. I think Malik Willis is good, but he's not going to get you to beat the best teams in the league.
I think that's a great shout for me. I think that's a great shout that they can kind of just recycle the receivers. Yeah. And what's great is that because they've not spent those top draft picks on them, they don't feel like they have to then re-sign them. Like we see that with the 49ers now. Like they've spent a lot of draft capital on Ayuk, on Debo. Yeah. Like you kind of have to pay those first rounders that you draft. Or I think Ayuk might be in the top of the second. But at least with a lot of the receivers on that depth chart, their second rounders, they're playing well in a system, they can kind of be quote unquote replaced. But then, this brings me to a pretty painful topic for me, but one that I think we have to discuss, and that is the Vikings defense, which absolutely eviscerated my poor Texans.
Yeah, Dom, the Vikings, who would have bet on Sam Darnold being an MVP frontrunner through the first 3 games? Because I'm sure no, I haven't. Maybe Harry Murkett has, who knows? But no, Dom, they absolutely dismantled the Texans. I think Greenlaw had 3 sacks alone. CJ Stroud for the first game, I believe in his entire career, looked bad. He looked like he had a terrible game, Dom. Well, like on the whole, I still think the Vikings are pretenders, which we'll talk about later. But Dom, what do you think?
So first of all, I want to defend my king, CJ Stroud. He had a lot of really great plays, multiple like key third down conversions and like great throws at that, just being taken off the board by offensive penalties. Like Laramie Tunsil alone, I think racked up like 70 yards. The offensive line was full starting all over the place. Basically, the Vikings defense had us in absolute fits. Like they put Brock Purdy through the ringer. They put the Texans through the ringer. I just think that I kind of can't quite believe what I'm seeing from the Minnesota Vikings, which is that through 3 games, they look like the strongest team in the league, I think. They found a winning formula, and that winning formula is such a key one to going the distance, which is quite, again, like almost like worrying for the Vikings. They've got a great passing attack. Justin Jefferson, obviously best wide receiver, but this offense has looked good without him on the field because he had like a bit of a niggle at the end of like last week, I think, wasn't on the field. Jordan Addison has missed quite a lot of time at this point. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson hasn't been on the field once yet. And this offense is just humming with or without those players. Like Jalen Naylor is looking like an offensive weapon at the moment. And I think that Kevin O'Connell is putting himself up there with the Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur, kind of like elite tier of offensive coordinator.
Same coaching tree.
Well, this is what's amazing with the Vikings, right? Is they have the elite offensive system with that whole Shanahan, McVay coaching. You get, deep crosses, play action, etc., etc. But what the Vikings now also have is the kryptonite to that offensive system, which is Brian Flores' just insane defense. Essentially, the Vikings have moneyballed their way into becoming the best team in the league. They have no star player on defense at the moment. Their scheme is, as I said, the Shanahan offensive kryptonite. There's not a star QB. They're just like kind of seeing value where others aren't. And it's such an interesting way to have kind of built this football team because the Brian Flores defense is literally insane. Like they have Harrison Smith, the safety, lined up at the line of scrimmage, and then he sprints to the central deep third of the field to kind of play that traditional safety role. Like as a quarterback, when you've got seconds to try and diagnose who's going when before the pass rush hits you, which at the moment in Minnesota is doing very regularly, you just simply don't have time to kind of work out why the hell is Harrison Smith over the A gap and then why is he 20 yards deep a blink of an eye later. Like it's a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks and it's working. The defense is now, the Brian Flores is now his like kind of like second year, I think, as the defensive coordinator in Minnesota or the third. And the scheme now is just developing. Like he used to have to send 6 or 7 to get pressure. He's now sending 4 or 5, but it looks like he's going to send 6 or 7. So quarterbacks are terrified. They had 5 sacks against the Texans. And I just think Flores is elite at the chess match. He knows exactly when to send the extra pressure, what the key plays are going to be, and knows exactly where to send it from. And honestly, if it wasn't against my Texans, it would have been poetry in motion.
Well, Dom, like we're both offensive guys, right? We both play receiver. That's what I listen.
Yeah. I think of myself as a Sean McVay, quite good looking, bit of an offensive mastermind.
But watching Brian Flores' Minnesota is actually fun. Watching like a D lineman peg it back to the middle of the field, corners blitzing. You can't really process it, and it's a really good way of sort of making up for not mediocre talent, because I do think they've got a better half of defense. But why it's so elite is because of their system. They don't run that Vic Fangio cover 2 that we talked about earlier in the podcast that everyone runs. I couldn't even tell you what they run. They just run everything and anything, and I think that's why it works so well, and also why I think it took more than a year to really drill the players into it. Because I think everyone has to buy in for that to work. If you're Harrison Smith, you've got to peg it back 30 yards, and he's a 30-year-old, north of 30.
Yeah, he's getting on.
Like, to trust your players that much, and for the players to trust you as a coach, I think is really good and really important. And the Vikings defense does look real to me.
Oh, it 100% looks real. I mean, like, it's all about versatility. Like, so Andrew Van Ginkel, he can rush the passer, but can drop into coverage. Nickel, Josh Metchulis, he can do both. Obviously, safeties can, Bynum and Harrison Smith can. Like, when you've got players who are like defensive chess pieces that you can just move around the formation and they can kind of fill multiple roles at any given point. It's not even like you can see, this is Honey Badger, or this is someone like Snead, who's like, that we know their roles in a defense. Like, they can literally do anything at any time, these players. And that's why I thought that the Dallas Turner pick was quite a good one, because Dallas Turner actually dropped back into coverage quite a lot in Alabama, so he kind of fit that role quite nicely. And also, like, Ivan Pace, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the league, the undrafted free agent linebacker, he wasn't even in on this game, and he's like a massive part of that defense. Like, he flies around. I mean, like, the Vikings are more than the plucky team I thought they would be. I was a big Vikings truther. I was a big Sam Darnold truther. You know that, and I've had my victory lap. But they're dominant on both sides of the ball, and they're 3-0. And I think they could win the NFC North if they keep playing like this.
Well, Dom, the consistent theme here is excellent coaching. With the Packers, more than some of the parts, their receivers, they're good, but the coaching really ties them together. The exact same for the Vikings. And that is what really separates the good teams from the great teams from the average teams, is high-level coaching. I heard Brett Coleman talk about this a couple of years ago on Twitter. The talent gap between the worst and best team isn't as large as you think it is. These guys are all amazing athletes who are incredibly talented. The biggest difference is coaching. And you've seen with the teams that are all 3-0, the consistent theme they have with all of them is excellent coaching.
That is a great point. And that's also a great segue into our final section of the pod, which is where we're going to rank now the 3-0 to the undefeated teams. So for our listeners, that's the Seattle Seahawks, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Minnesota Vikings. At the time of recording this, which is about 7 p.m. British time, Monday Night Football has not happened yet. The Bills are 2-0. They might be 3-0, but we're recording this before they play, so they're not being included in this. So we're going to start then. Nu, let me hear your bottom two, and then I'll give you my bottom two. So start with your fourth.
So my fourth is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, snap.
And my third is Minnesota, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, right. So let's quickly do Pittsburgh.
So Pittsburgh, you know what? I'm not a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. They're one of my least favorite teams in the NFL. Can't really tell you why. Just never liked them. Never have. But so happy to see Justin Fields succeeding. It really puts a smile on my face. The fact that he's brought this team to 3-0, I think the whole NFL community was really rooting for him. However, I just don't see Arthur Smith taking this team very far. I just don't see the weapons they have on offense to beat a Ravens, to beat one of the better teams. They have an elite defense. TJ Watt, I think your take about TJ Watt on one of the early podcast episodes has aged very poorly because he does look elite, and I'm going to use the word elite correctly. But he looks absolutely amazing. And I think the defense as a whole is really coming together. But again, I think you saw it when, it's, again, good coaching, but I don't think they'll get further than, 9-8. That sort of maybe a wild card berth is why I see them going.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is my bottom one as well. They're my fourth. I think the teams they've beaten is the Falcons with an immobile Kirk Cousins. Yeah. They've beaten the Broncos with Bo Nix, who looked like Zach Wilson. And they've beaten the Chargers, who at some points didn't have Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, or Justin Herbert. Obviously, you can only beat the teams you play. That's part of the NFL. But for that reason, I'm not going to rank them above other teams that I think have looked better and have beaten better teams. But the bottom line for me with the Steelers is I'm just so here for the fact that Justin Fields is 3-0, and he's definitely earned that long-term starter role. And I hope he can continue to develop. Like, Justin Fields has always been my guy. People like Bears fans were getting weirdly twisted that I said they should move on from Justin Fields. That doesn't mean I don't like the guy. It's just that obviously moving on was the right move. But that's the thing. Justin Fields leaving the Bears was right for him, and the Bears drafting Caleb Williams was right for them. It's a win-win. My third team is the Chiefs.
Oh, so, okay. I like that.
I've got the Chiefs, and you can tell me about the Vikings afternoon.
Yeah.
I've got the Chiefs essentially for the same reason as I have the Steelers, really. They beat the Ravens because of Isaiah likely not being able to get his toe in the end zone. They beat the Bengals because of a PI call. That was the right call. I'm not going on this whole, the Chiefs have paid off the refs tirade. But that did bail them out. And they beat the Falcons because of a PI call, which was actually like a bad call. So this is really, I think, the worst they've looked under Patrick Mahomes, despite their record, which obviously now that I've said that means they're going to go win the Super Bowl, and I'm going to look like a moron. But if we learn anything, we know not to kind of underestimate the regular season Chiefs. But I genuinely believe, despite the record, that this is the worst they've looked.
No, I completely agree. The only reason why I have them higher is just because of the talent they still have. Obviously Pacheco's out with an injury, but I just still think Patrick Mahomes just drags that team forward. I really, really do. And I really agree. I love the ref ball memes. I think they're quite funny, but I think they're just that. I think they're just memes. As much as Ben Shepley wants to call me a conspiracy theorist, it's not going to work. I completely agree. I personally have them on my 2, and for the same reason.
Okay, so we'll talk about the Vikings in a second, but who then is your second highest?
So my second highest is the Chiefs. and my highest
Okay, right.
is the Seattle Seahawks.
Okay, Seahawks are my second highest,
Okay.
but the Vikings are my top.
Okay.
So let's talk about the Seahawks.
Okay, so
you start.
So the Seahawks, the reason why I put them so high is their receiver core. I genuinely believe that they are one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. JSN has really developed. Last as a rookie, he was just merely like a piece. Obviously had that big drive against the Eagles, but he's really developed now into, I believe, a Pro Bowl level player. And he's the perfect complement to DK Metcalf. A big physical receiver next to a tidy route runner is such a nice compliment. Similar to how it is in Green Bay, they're better than the sum of their parts. I like Zach Charbonnet. I think he's a good player. Even without Kenneth Walker, their run game is still strong. Geno Smith, Sam Howell, it's a good quarterback room. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I think they're a really, really solid, good team.
See, I think that Geno Smith at the moment is the most underrated quarterback in the league. A bit like how Matthew Stafford last year was just not getting the flowers he deserved because it's Matthew Stafford. It's like an older quarterback. It's not that exciting. They're not like, bailing out of clean pockets and throwing sidearms. But Geno Smith, I think, through 3 weeks, has played the best level of quarterback play in the NFL currently, I think. And you're right, I think that DK Metcalf has over 360 yards on the season. JSN had 119 last week. Tyler Lockett is still producing. There's 3 strong receivers. And the defense is holding up really well. They've kept every quarterback they've played to under 150 net passing yards. But they've not played the strongest of teams again. Broncos, Pats, and Dolphins. The Dolphins without Tua, but I think they've looked really, really, really good. And almost to kind of link back to the start of the pod, they're firing on offense now that Shane Waldron's gone. But that then brings us to the final team that we've not discussed. Your third highest and my first. I think one of the best teams in the NFL, the Minnesota Vikings. So, why are they your third?
As a Dom, I just believe that there are teams like this every year who play well above their means. They get hot. In the UK, we call it a purple patch for football. I think that's exactly that. I've seen Sam Darnold play many, many years in his career. I've never seen him play at this level. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he can keep this going. Maybe he can be the player that you think he is, Dom. But I just see one bad game and the whole thing crashing down. I think the floor as a scheme is really good, really exciting. But I think if you go up against a grizzled veteran who knows what he's doing, he's not going to get surprised by all the tricks and all the, gizmos, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the word is, but that Flores runs. And I think that once they go up against real teams with really good, experienced quarterbacks, I think that defensive scheme will come crashing down. And when the offense doesn't have much time, I think it will affect the whole team as a whole. And you're right, I think the injuries, they played above their means without Jefferson, without Addison. They should not be as good as they are. And I think they will be found out.
I think you're a sick, twisted hater because the Vikings have beaten the 49ers and the Texans.
Two rookie
of the
players.
Best teams in the NFL. Two of the best teams in the NFL.
Two quarterbacks on rookie deals. That's what I'm saying, Dom. It's because I'm saying that they haven't gone against these.
No. You got to understand that a lot of the quarterbacks that win Super Bowls are quarterbacks on rookie deals. Like, calling it just because they're on rookie deals doesn't mean they are rookie quarterbacks. Like, there's a big difference there. You're using like a logical fallacy against me here. Like, CJ Stroud, obviously, he had 2 elite seasons in Ohio State, had an offensive rookie of the year campaign last year. He won it. Brock Purdy, similarly, absolutely crushed it as a rookie. Like, yeah, they're not quite unquote experienced in the NFL like an Aaron Rodgers is, but you'd struggle to find 2 quarterbacks who are kind of more cerebral and able to kind of cut through the mess than those 2. Like, their games isn't like Lamar Jackson running around, kind of making plays by themselves, or like, chucking it deep to defenses with their great arm strength. Like, they are the more kind of like, as I said, cerebral. They cut through the noise. Like, they are like pocket passers for the most part. And that should really, with it very, very, very experienced, well, at least in Brock Purdy's case, very experienced head coaches and offensive coordinators. So I think to say that they've not like beaten anyone is crazy, because I don't know what teams you'd put above the Texans and the 49ers. They're top 5 teams now. Come on.
No, Dom, I understand what you're saying, but like you said, CJ Stroud's only had 20 starts in his whole career. He's never faced a defense in the NFL.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, obviously he's played at Ohio State. He's not going up against Indiana here, is he? But what I'm saying is that he hasn't seen a defense ever like that. And with Purdy, his offensive scheme is touchdown, check down. It's not super complicated. It's simple for that offense. And what Brian Flores did was confuse him because it wasn't pre-snap reads. He wasn't able to basically accurately read the defense. But I'm saying when he goes up against a Rodgers or even like a Mayfield, I'm not even talking about the quality of play. I'm talking about the experience of player. I think they will see through Flores' defense.
I think that is an absolutely mental take. But the final thing I'd add is that they've also got the counterpunch to the most dominant offensive system for the last 5 years in Brian Flores' defense. So I think they've got offense, they've got defense. I think right now they are the best team in the NFL. They look the best. They might not finish with the best record. I doubt they will. But nevertheless, I think they're absolutely cooking at the moment. So, Nu, that then concludes our NFL Week 3 review. We actually, funnily enough, next week have the London games, which is the Jets and the Vikings, which is actually shaped up to be a very, very good game.
Yeah.
So,
well, Aaron Rodgers will expose Brian Flores.
Oh my God, I'm going to be there literally live messaging you when Aaron Rodgers throws 2 interceptions and it goes for 150.
I bet you a beer that that he will get embarrassed 3-1. If they lose the game, you owe me a pint.
Okay, all right, I back that. But anyway, that then brings us to the end of the episode. If you like the episode, please give it a like please give it a like on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel. Listen on Spotify as well. Really pumps the numbers up. Don't forget to subscribe. We're closing in new on our 100 subscribers. Well, we're quite far away from it. We're about 60, but still, nevertheless, 40 away is not that far, even though it's quite a big jump from 60. But anyway, I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's been my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been on Sportsmanlike Conduct. Until the next time, Nu, see ya.
See ya.